we can start to run, right? It's one of those things that everybody thinks they can do, but very few people actually spend the time to learn it. Like, you wouldn't just jump in a pool and think you can swim, but you go to the track and you think you can run. And in a nuanced level, there's a lot more to it.
Right, welcome back to the Total Try podcast. Today we are talking about running, and not the usual running chat of what are the cool, sexy sessions and how hard you're going to go out and blow your brains out. We're going to we're going to dig into something a little different.
Yeah, and this is more about the stuff that the athletes don't necessarily think about very regularly. But one thing that they do constantly obsess over, myself included, for sure, but they often get it just that little bit wrong, right?
Yeah, so to help us unpack what athletes are getting a little bit wrong, we have asked Rose Fernando from Podium Physio to join us today. Rose is a physio by trade, based out of Raynes Park in London, quite well known in our community with her sister Jen. And you guys also have Run Clinic as well, don't you? So maybe just tell us a little bit about what your background is and what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm an MSK physio, so primarily dealing with sports-related injuries. So we do the usual physio consultations, both face-to-face and virtually, but we've also set up a new run clinic, which is very specifically trying to kind of piece together what you do in a physio consultation. So looking at your injury history, looking at your strength, looking at your mobility, but then pairing that up with what your running style is like and seeing how we can provide you with the most bespoke sort of strength and conditioning program, but also looking at things like running drills to make you the most efficient runner that you can be. And that's something that we'll get into a little bit more in the chat today. But I think there's a lot of things that runners do right, but there's a lot of things that they could do better.
I think it's a super interesting topic, running. Like, it's something that we all do pretty much. As soon as we can walk, we can start to run, right? And it's one of those things that everybody thinks they can do, but very few people actually spend the time to learn it. Like, you wouldn't just jump in a pool and think you can swim, but you go to the track and you think you can run. And in a nuanced level, there's a lot more to it, right?
Yeah, and particularly with Run Clinic, like a lot of people do run analysis. And I guess the slightly different thing about our run analysis is we purely do it outdoors. We don't really have any interest in looking at you run on a treadmill, because most people run very differently on a treadmill to how they would run outdoors. And I think particularly within the triathlon community, as you said, a lot of people do swim drills, really hone down on their technique, but no one really ever thinks about how they can become more efficient as a runner. And that's what Run Clinic is really about.
Do they do all their swim drills? I don't know. I think that's debatable. I know we certainly push it very hard. I think we're winning the battle now, aren't we, Grant, with swim drills within our cohort of athletes. But yeah, no, you're right. I mean, look, we ran. You guys were very kind and gave up some time and did a bit of a taster session with some athletes in one of the Royal Parks in London the other week, which was very interesting. And what was amazing that came out of that day was, and I think quite often when you're teaching, age group triathletes skills, it's very hard in one session to sort of change the mold. And we discussed how this session was going to be, and you guys are the experts, and I sort of came to you guys and said, what I'd really love to see is someone, everybody get actually better by the end of the session. It's a really difficult thing to achieve, so you guys built the session around that, and we had everyone lined up doing drills. And I mean, to start with, you can imagine, even I put my hand up, most drills, like they're not natural to me, certainly some of the more complicated ones, and people think they can run, like you say, Grant, but like, there's a massive amount of uncoordination. It's not that they're incapable; they just haven't done it before. They haven't started to like connect that wiring within the body. And what was amazing, by the end, we got everyone lined up at the end, didn't we, doing all of the drills again? And it was like, when you see, it wasn't as good as when you see the Kenyans doing it in a line, but it was a huge step towards it, wasn't it? Like people were like miles, but we were all like shocked. We were, wow, this was really, really worked. Because to deliver that on on a mass scale in a 2-hour window, I think is very difficult. You were trying to give people a taster, and the feedback I've had off athletes since, actually, like people really are like carrying on with these drills now and understanding that they think they can run, but they can't do those things. So surely there's got to be some benefit to sticking at it long term. So yeah, it was a good session. That.
So I guess on that, what are kind of some of the useful parts to like, why do we do run drills? Whenever I do a group session, I always give them a bunch of run drills, and as you say, they're absolutely hopeless at it. Is it like just generally most people are completely uncoordinated when they start doing run drills? So what is the benefit of it, or are we just up for a laugh and want to watch people make silly movements?
I do think that is the problem with run drills, is that a lot of people, that's a tick box activity, but they aren't actually sure why they're doing the running drill in the first instance. And I think what a lot of people don't realise is that they can get a training stimulus from doing the run drill. And, particularly from a physio point of view, primarily one of the main reasons we give people run drills is it's really good for your bone health and it's really good for your tendon health. And if you incorporate those regularly into your training, you massively reduce your risk of stress fractures and tendinopathies.
Especially from a bone point of view, like, was the fact I read, and you can fact check me on this or you can correct me, Rose, if you know a little bit, but your bones become, or the cells in your bones become numb to the stress after about 60 seconds of performing an exercise, right?
Yeah.
So doing these little short bouts of bouncing around and being a little bit explosive perhaps gives you that stimulus before you numb your bones, I guess, to the...
Yeah, exactly. And I think what you have to remember within the sport of triathlon as well is that, cycling and swimming are relatively non-weight bearing forms of exercise. So the only stimulus really that you're getting that's kind of helping with the bone turnover is the running. But running itself actually isn't good for your bone health. It's the drills that give you that bone turnover, essentially.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think there's one thing we try and bring across in this podcast is these little snippets of stuff that you assume running is weight bearing, therefore running is good for bone health. And actually, hopefully, just that, if anyone takes one thing away that gets you doing your drills, that might be it. These little things that stick in people's minds. So that's a great point. Yeah, give us an example of some drills, and stuff people can be doing, where they can get resource for that, and maybe like what it is that people struggle with.
Yeah, so I guess the classic running drills that you would do, and these are typically things that if you grew up training on an athletics track, these are the types of things that you would do. But things like A skips, B skips, high knee drives, straight leg running, open the gate. They're all basically exercises that they're essentially functional plyometric exercises for runners. So they're basically working your stretch, shorten cycle, which is really good for tendon adaptation, but also really good for your bone cell turnover. And from a strength point of view, they're basically trying to get your posterior kinetic chain working to make you as resilient and efficient as possible as a runner. And I actually think, Ron, you might have mentioned this on the pod with Cam last week, but a lot of triathletes, what you see is when they come off the bike, they're basically running as if they're sitting because they're so quad dominant. And that is a massive benefit of doing running drills. It's all about getting your kinetic chain, but posteriorly working. And that's going to really help in the latter part of your racing.
I think you said that to me on a pre-call about this podcast, didn't you, Grant? That was the first thing you said. Everyone's running like they're sitting, like they're sitting at the desk. So, yeah, I couldn't agree more. When it's especially dealing with like amateurs, it's just the byproduct of the way most people work these days, isn't it? You sat down an awful lot, and not just getting up and going for a run because you're probably running with poor form. Set the form first is sort of what you're saying, isn't it? Get everything fired up, run in the correct way from the start. Yeah.
One, I guess, question I have a little bit, and I've got my own theory on it, which is kind of, I guess, how I describe it to athletes. But a lot of running drills are quite coordination heavy, right? They're quite rhythmic. I think when people start doing them, they almost feel like they need to have a history in dancing to be able to execute them well. Why do you think they are so rhythmic?
I guess when you think about running, it is a bit of a coordination sport because you're loading one side to the other. And I guess the one thing that athletes or runners are really bad at is their arm drive. So a lot of people just forget about their arms. And then as soon as you get them to try and do a running drill and trying to get a high knee drive and getting their arms to move in that same motion, it's like analysis paralysis and people just don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
Analysis paralysis. That's a great term. I bet you use that in run clinic all the time, don't you? Yeah, I think it's. Do you think people are just scared with drills? Do you think it's alien to them? They weren't brought up in a running world. They've come into maybe triathlon in later life, and like Grant said at the start, yeah, we're all just born. We can walk, so therefore we can run. This is introducing this later in life feels like with swimming. It's like you have to introduce it because you have to learn to swim because it's not something we do. Runners just bypass this and start running. And I guess one of the whole points to what we're saying today is to I always talk about this, like if I could go back 20 years and start all over in triathlon again, this is where I would have made the absolute priority because it would have changed the outcome of my races much, much more than all of the hard work. You can still do the hard work alongside this. This is not like a massive taxation on your time. It's just about understanding it. And back then I didn't understand the benefits. I didn't see the level of performance that could be gained from something so small. It was just a mentality of hard work will trump all of that. And it absolutely won't. And funnily enough, and we'll probably come on to talk. We will come on to talking about terrain shortly, but because I didn't buy into any of that, I did go through a period of running in the mountains a lot, running with a lot of elevation, snowdonia, actually trail running. And it's weird. I remember someone saying to me at the time, like, with where your running's at, surely that's not, I was doing it because I enjoyed it. Surely that's not what you should be focused on. You probably need to be at the track. You need to be, and actually it was the period I ran my best because probably for all of the mechanical gains and the benefits that running in that terrain can give you, which it's not the same as drills, but it's yet another, technical development of your running rather than just going and pushing hard, on the streets by where you live kind of thing.
Definitely, I mean, increases your coordination, right? And I guess it go back to like definitely my thinking of why we do drills, why they're so coordination heavy, why exactly as you said, Rose, like running is a rhythm thing where we're essentially repeating the same step over and over and over again. To get good at it, we almost have to do something more complicated. We've got to challenge that rhythm. We've got to challenge that coordination so that when we get down to running, we can send that message to our muscles to fire in the right pattern, to be a lot smoother, and ultimately more efficient. And I guess, as you were saying, Phil, going off road, running down a mountain where there's tree roots, there's rocks, there's whatever in the way, you've got to kind of also send that message to our legs and our limbs and our body to do certain things. And the more challenging that becomes, I guess the smoother you'll be when it comes to just running on a straight road, right?
Yeah, I have a lot of my athletes that they're because they live in the correct terrain for that kind of running. Their long run, which I don't actually give all athletes the traditional long run. There's arguments for and against whether a triathlete needs just that long couple of hours of easy running. But those guys that live in that terrain, I actually use it quite heavily because I sort of believe in the benefits of what they can get from that. Especially if you've got someone that they're not buying into drills or they're not probably executing them as often as they should. This is a way of tricking the body a little bit, and they enjoy it. So go and do it, and actually their run economy improves for that type of running. And you just you're selling them one idea, and you actually know that you're trying to get something else out of them a little bit. So, Rose, you guys have got like probably a good library of drills and stuff. I think we'll share them in the show notes below as well with some links so that where you talk about A skips, B skips, things like that. People that aren't au fait with what they are can give some of those a go, and maybe even we'll share your details so people can reach out and help. Any contact is good for people to help understand these drills. I know when you guys were demonstrating this to start with, athletes were looking at you like, oh, I can't move like that, and Yeah, and they were all moving so much better by the end. It's just, and Grant, the way you mentioned like this rhythm thing. So I think I said something on that training day about, because it's not natural to me, I actually nearly say the rhythm in my head. It's the only way I can do it, to like get the timing of the feet to move it. I'm not very good at dancing either, by the way. Although Rose may argue that late in the evening at a wedding that suddenly I become a dancer. But anyway, we we were at a wedding together a little while ago that can't say I remember getting home actually. But anyway, I digress. Okay, let's move on to the second thing that people maybe aren't thinking about. I'm going to talk about strides, and in particularly uphill strides. Who wants to go?
Yeah, who wants to talk about that? Do you know something? It's probably one of the first things I'd put in somebody's program. You know, especially like a beginner runner or somebody that's coming back to running, get them running steady, get them, you know, able to absorb a little bit of load, and then get them on a hill. Just some short, a little bit faster strides, get them used to applying a little bit more force through the ground in quite a safe environment.
Yeah, and I think what people forget about uphill strides is the reason it's safer is because it actually reduces the amount of force and load going through your joints compared to if you're doing your strides on a flat. So basically, when you go uphill, you reduce the ground reaction forces. So it's actually much safer and better for your joints. And actually, particularly if you've had knee issues, because it shifts some of the load up to your pelvis. If you've had any sort of like patellofemoral, like knee tendon issues, yeah, it really helps. And people are quite often really surprised that they struggle to do it on the flat, but when they go uphill, it becomes easier, which is converse to what you would think.
Yeah, 100%. I pointed at myself because I had a sore knee and asked Rose what I should do, and she said run uphill um, a couple of months ago. But yeah, I guess if you think about it, that when you are running on the flat, it's all about how quickly can you snap off the ground, and therefore you've got a big peak in force. But if that force is spread out over a longer period, you know, you're not quite experiencing the same peaks.
Do you think with this, like, you know, we said earlier, we're winning with people doing swim drills. I think, you know, something that's really changed the last few years, people buying into S&C, probably not just because we don't shut up about it, but actually the gym is cool. You know, like, it's just people are seeing a lot more of it on social media and therefore buying in. You know, this is, you know, there's a big strength component to this as well, isn't it? You know, again, someone that buys into getting stronger, in more force, etc. You know, probably they're just not thinking of this as that. I even talk about, you know, like doing short, high power VO2 reps on the bike, and, you know, hitting high numbers, hitting high paces. Hitting high paces comes with a risk, as you know, just saying there from a running point of view. But you know, from a cycling point of view, hitting some big power numbers is also a strength gain as well. And this sits perfectly in that category as well, doesn't it? Where, you know, you're getting sport specific strength.
Yeah, and again, I think people just forget that it is really functional at the end of the day to run on an incline. And you know, you're talking about like a maximum 10% incline here. Your calf complex is having to work really hard to propel you forward, your glute, your hamstring. Like, again, it's just functionally loading that posterior chain. And for a lot of people who overstride, it's actually really helpful as well, because you basically can't overstride if you're running uphill. So if you're looking to try and change your cadence a little bit, it's actually a really good technical way to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at the vast majority. I mean, we kind of mentioned when everybody's off a bike, they run as if they're sat down, right? And oftentimes they're overstriding. There's a very common pattern of, you know, what the majority of runners do, and kind of hill strides are almost the remedy for that, right? And it forces you a little bit more upright, forces you to use your glutes, use your hamstrings, and land a little bit more underneath your center of gravity, right?
Yeah, and like when you go back onto the flat, everything just feels so much easier.
Yeah, but it's not about including these things on a one-off basis, is it? It's about building its habit creation. It has to just become a part of how you set up for a run session, what you include on your easy run, you know, and having it in for the long term. And just, I think what I like about stuff like this is the other drills you spoke about. There's a high cognitive load in learning those. I think stuff like uphill strides, there's a lower cognitive load. You can sort of relax into them and let the very nature of the fact it's uphill, it's not as heavy on, I must execute with perfect form, because the hill itself is helping create that form. I think that's why it's a great one to have in on a very regular basis. It's just easy to execute without, it being a drain on your mental resources if you've had a busy day in the office, or you've got other stuff going on in your mind.
And that's one area I think people do get a little bit wrong sometimes when you introduce hill strides. Not thinking about the form and trying too hard. If you imagine yourself sprinting up a hill, what happens? Go left to right. Your limbs are flying all over the place because you're trying too hard, and you're not developing that strength in the right place.
Yeah, I quite often use a session actually that's like 30 seconds medium uphill first, because at medium, people are relaxed, they're just getting in the flow. And then you do some short hill reps afterwards because they're not overthinking the process. It's like, well, I'll just do it, but I'll just do it a bit faster. And then more relaxed into the 10-second efforts afterwards. So, and I think what you're saying here is, 6 to 10 seconds, aren't you? Uphill, full recovery, and full recovery. I mean, it's not like walk back down and go again. You could take longer if you want as well, can't you?
Yeah, and quite often I just tell people to incorporate it within their training session. Like, it's not something that you need to find a hill at the beginning of your run to do. It's just pick a slightly hillier route and do some of your strides in the middle of the run once you've warmed up into it, and then finish the easy run after that. One question we actually always ask people in Run Clinic is, what do you think about when we tell you to do strides? And everyone's just like, quick running. It's like, that actually isn't what strides is. It is about, as you said, trying to think about propelling up the hill, getting that good arm drive, getting the knee drive, getting into hip extension. It's all about homing in good running technique.
I actually get my athletes to like go Usain Bolt style at the start, and then that's what I want. Oh, I'm joking, but that is what they do, isn't it? It's like they become a 100-meter sprinter at the start. So
do you think
yeah,
anybody's actually done that?
Sorry.
Do you think anybody's actually done that at the start of their hill
I
strides?
hope someone does it now. I want someone to post this on social media later that they're doing this with their strides. So maybe that could be our thing, actually. That's how all our athletes start their strides. Good. Okay. The third thing people aren't thinking about, bespoke strength and conditioning. So Rose, talk to us a little bit about this. This is very much at the core of what you do with Run Clinic, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I think a pet peeve of ours, and I think a lot of physios, is that, those Instagram posts when it's like 3 best exercises to strengthen your glutes.
Yeah, that's how I do my strength and conditioning. That's just what I wake up every
Yeah,
day.
and like so many people do that. That's
Yeah,
just the world we
yeah.
live in now, isn't it? Is that you see something on social media and you're like, right, I'm going to do that. You have to remember that you're so individual as an athlete. And what you need to focus on is very different to what another athlete needs to focus on. And that's what we try to do with Run Clinic, is we're looking at your injury history. We're then doing a mobility and a strength screen to see where are your deficits and what do you need to focus on. And we're looking at your running technique and where you need to be strong to facilitate the way that you run. And I think me and Jen are actually a really good example of this, of we're identical twin sisters who run in very different ways. Jen's a 4-foot runner. She has to really think about strengthening through her calf complex, her gastroc, her soleus. I'm a midfoot runner. I very much need to focus on strengthening through my hips and my hamstring. And if we both did the same S&C in the gym, we'd be getting it really, really wrong. And I think, yeah, that's where people fall awry with just following what they see on social media.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating to get different foot strikes. What, completely off on a tangent, but why do you think that developed differently?
I actually don't know, because we both grew up going to the track. We pretty much did all of the same training sessions. Admittedly, when we were younger, Jen was an 800-meter runner. I was 1500. So I think if you think about 400, 800-meter runners, like, they do get up on their toes a little bit more, whereas I did more of like the 15-3 on the track. And to be fair, neither of us became aware of our running technique, I don't think, until we became physios and kind of we looked into that a little bit more. But yeah, we run so differently. but we run very similar times. So it's not to say that one running technique is better than the other. And that is absolutely not what we try to do in Run Clinic. We're not trying to change the way that you run. We're just trying to make you as efficient as possible in the way that you do run. And part of that is doing the right S&C to facilitate your running style.
I think it's like you couldn't have a better example, could you, than identical twins that run very similar times but need to do S&C with two different focuses. It's like the perfect sales pitch for why people should explore this. And I think, Grant, we'd certainly discuss this when coaching. We're not expert S&C coaches, and I think this is where, when you've got athletes that have certain issues or need to move on in certain ways, reaching out to an expert who can just take it to that next level and just see the finer detail in their field of expertise, and relay it back to the coach, the athlete, and help them. And I certainly had some very good success. I think one of the feedbacks I got off one of my athletes the other day was, these guys are geniuses, basically, really moved her level of running on, just because it was specific to her. And I think when you see what comes out of it, it's simple, but you have to be able to see what that person needs. And it's nuanced, isn't it? Between, it's such a little change that actually an untrained person wouldn't really, they'd look at Jen's strength and conditioning and go, that looks fine. They look at Rose's, that looks fine as well. I'll just do one of those. But the outcome is very different. It's fascinating. Yeah, very, very interesting.
I think also what you have to remember with S&C is it's trying to make you as resilient as possible as an athlete, but it's only going to do that if it's addressing your personal deficits in your stability, your balance, your core. If you're just following a generic program, it's not really going to make you resilient.
Yeah, you've got different tolerances in all your different tissues, right? And you need to increase those tolerances for the load that's going through them, and that's obviously going to be different depending on exactly with your example, forefoot or midfoot striking. It's going to change. For myself, for example, I know my right glute doesn't work very well, and I need to put a little bit more focus into making sure that is always strong and healthy. And else I start to spiral and get different issues. What do you think about
just digging into that little, Grad? This is just interesting. I have a similar problem on the other glute. So actually, if we did a 3-legged race, we'd know which way to stand round, wouldn't we? But that wasn't what I was going to say here. What I was going to say was, the issues with the glute, and especially like being, a performance runner. Do you find this then causes problems further up the chain, further down the chain with injury? Maybe Rose, you have some view on that as well, or?
Is that the side that you had the stress fracture on?
Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Oh, there you go. There's an issue.
Yeah, because if you think about it, the point of resistance training is it's trying to take the load away from your joint, because your muscles are trying to absorb the load as much as possible, aren't they? So if you're weak into that muscle, then the load is going to get shifted up or down the chain or into the joint.
Yeah, something that's actually really interesting. He suffered with a lot of problems in that hip, like over years. It would take me out for 2-3 weeks at a time. And after I got a stress fracture that took me out for months at a time, you kind of were thinking back. I mean, the physio that I was working with at the time, the question mark was, all those times that you maybe had a bad hip, was that a stress reaction? Was that, something? But yeah, anyway, definitely something that I'm very, very conscious of now. You said you had similar issues with your left hip, Phil.
Yeah, I just weak on that side. What I'm gonna just digging even further into what you said there, Greg, because I said earlier, if I could go back 20 years and do things differently, and do you, your own issue with your hip there? I guess as a coach, that must play a role in how much you want your athletes to not have to go. I mean, I'm not just talking about a hip. It goes into everything, doesn't it? It goes into, trying to use, for example, like some of the stuff Rose has just said there about, the specifics required for the individual, because it helps avoid all of those negative periods, which must, as an athlete, have been very hard for you to deal with, being out for weeks at a time, especially being a professional.
A really good example is having a bad Achilles. Anybody that's ever had a bad Achilles, they know that they'll go to bed, they'll wake up in the morning, and the first thing they think of is, I hope my Achilles isn't sore when I step out of bed in the morning. It always is. And it's miserable, and it stops you from doing so much if you have it chronically. And if you can prevent these little things by, doing your run drills, doing your hill strides, doing those specific things that you need to in the gym, it just makes sport so much more enjoyable, right?
I I'm gonna go on. This is probably gonna go on some other weird tangent now, but like listening to what you say there, and Rose, I think you will agree with this. Like going to something, and I'm only going to use Run Clinic because you're on, but there's lots of examples of this where athletes going through the process of understanding themselves is ultimately like what you're trying to deliver, and that's where they gain the knowledge to self-control things, to understand why they need to do things their way, develop their own S&C routine that works for them with their weaknesses. I was talking to a nutritionalist on a course I was on a while ago, and she said to me, 'cause I was talking, how do you work with clients, what to charge, etc. And she was like, well, I charge this and it's a fair amount of money, but if I'm still working with this person beyond 3 months, I feel that I've not done my job very well, because it's quite a high price you charge, but it's a lot of contact, it's a lot of learning. She's trying to empower the athlete to understand themselves, and it's sort of the same here. That Grant, you talk about like all of the things you have, but it's because over time you've learned so much about your own body that it's what leads you into coaching, isn't it? You understand, and effectively, I think that is the correct process for most athletes, is to become really well educated themselves about themselves. And I think things like Run Clinic really help that. So
Can you shortcut that and not have to go through the Achilles tendinopathy, the stress fractures, etc.? Can you understand where those weaknesses are likely to be before
well,
the injury, right?
going full circle,
Uh,
how did we ever how the original link with Podium here was you talking to me, Grant, about what's one of the biggest problems we face as coaches: injured athletes. It's not good for anyone. People's minds, it's not good for their head. It's not good for their progress. It's not good for you as the coach. It's very difficult to manage. What we need is, athletes to have access to the right people. And yeah, super important part of the tie up here. Not that has anything to do with this podcast, but that is where the original sort of link came from, really. So
Yeah, and knowledge is power. Like, you are so much more likely to do something and implement something in your training if you know why you're doing it. Like, I do think it's really important to know why you're doing specific strength and conditioning exercises in the gym. Why are you doing running drills? Why should you not run through pain? What's going to happen? If you understand all of that, then you do recover so much quicker, but you also reduce the incidence of that injury coming back in the future.
yeah, absolutely. Right, let's go on to point number 4. Rose, your favourite subject other than
Oh,
guinea pigs. We're going to talk
I could
about
talk about running shoes all day.
yeah. Let's talk shoes.
Should guinea pigs wear running shoes? That's the question.
Okay, Rose, talk to us about running shoes.
So I think an issue again that people make with running shoes is they follow a hype or follow a trend. So quite often you'll see an elite athlete that's using a certain carbon racing shoe, and then you'll buy it and then you'll just start implementing it in all of your sessions. I think, running shoes don't have to be complicated, but each shoe should have a purpose within your training. And particularly when it comes to carbon shoes, they're probably the one shoe that people have that increases their risk of injury. And carbon doesn't need to be a regular feature in your training. They should really be there for a few key tune-up sessions before you go into your race, but they're not something that you should be training in regularly, week on week, because, I've not read the evidence, and I don't know if there is literature out there that supports this, but anecdotally in clinic, people who regularly wear carbon shoes get injured pretty quickly.
There has been some. I was looking up some research the other day off the back of a comment in one of our chats, which I think you responded to, actually. I can't remember. About somebody suggesting that you should wear carbon shoes all the time because it decreases load. And the evidence that the research that I found was very much that it's absorbed further up the chain, generally speaking.
Yeah.
more
And
knees.
initially, when super shoes first came out, we did see a quite big spike in people having stress fractures around the hip and the pelvis. And the initial thought process was that because it shifted the load higher up the kinetic chain, that's why people were getting injuries in those areas. There's a bit of a debate on that now, whether actually the issue is that because carbon shoes absorb more load, people can do more training. And actually, it's the increase in training volume that therefore causes the risk of injury rather than you wearing carbon shoes within themselves.
Yeah, and you run faster too, right? 'Cause,
Yeah.
again,
And
with
that's something we talk to people about often in clinic is it's the intensity of your running that is more likely to cause injury than the volume of your training that you do.
So
what
what you
about?
really, sorry, Grant, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was just listening to what you were both saying there. I'm thinking about an athlete of mine, very, very talented runner actually within triathlon. He does all of his training in carbon, but actually everything you said there is conversations that we've had about it moving up the train based off where his problems are and what he is trying to protect by using carbon to offload a little bit. For him, it works. He also doesn't do extreme run volume. He also, based off a back issue that he's had very long standing separate issue, doesn't do an awful lot of intensity. So the agreement is that, yes, for a high percentage of his running, he's using carbon because it works for him. But it's a considered thing. It's been thought about. We've debated it. We've looked at the pros and cons and gone, yeah, for you that, but I think in general, like your general overarching view is, and taking all of those nuances into account, you definitely don't need to be running your carbon shoes every day, or nor can people with in general afford to running carbon shoes every day. Yeah. But look, I remember when they first came out, and I was like, wow, these make you feel better running. These make me feel better about myself running. So there is, I get the tendency to want to put them on. They feel great to run in, but it's and I think you're going to talk actually a little bonus section as well about like running on different terrain and stuff. But yeah, interesting. What were you going to say, Grant?
I was just going to say, like, when we all started running, right, carbon shoes weren't a thing. And whenever you went to race or even go to the track and do faster session, it was the complete opposite. You were in something resembling a plimsoll, very low stack height, almost zero cushioning. The battle was to get the lightest shoe possible. The feedback loop there was very, very instant. You knew when you'd done too much running in your little flyaway shoes because your calves would be absolutely killing you for days. But the response isn't quite as quick, or the feedback loop isn't quite as quick with carbon shoes, is it?
Yeah, I think the problem with carbon is a lot of people get through their session and they feel great. And the next day they're a bit like, God, my legs are a bit tired. But, particularly for someone who's double training, you could do an interval session in the morning in your carbons, feel great, and then do another session in the afternoon. And it's not until the next day you're thinking, oh, God, probably shouldn't have done that.
I guess in terms of bone stress injuries as well, it's not the same as your calf hurting. It's dead obvious, isn't it? You get out of bed the next day and your calves are killing. What's building up in the background, maybe if the carbon is becoming a problem. Talk a little bit about matching footwear to run style. I saw this in our notes and thought this is a really interesting conversation. And this goes away from this carbon discussion more to probably individual shoe brands, stack heights, etc.
Yeah, and I think, basically the thing that you've got to remember about any shoe is that stack is basically just how much foam is under the shoe and how much it's lifting you off the ground. So the higher the stack, the more it's shifting the load up the kinetic chain, so more towards your knee and your hip. The lower the stack, the more the load that's going through your foot and your ankle. And to be honest, this is why I always recommend a shoe rotation, because if you don't let yourself get used to one certain type, you become quite adaptable as a runner. Whereas if you're always wearing high stack shoes, you might then struggle to transition into a lower stack shoe or a carbon shoe because then it's suddenly changed. It's shifted where the load is, and then you struggle a little bit with that. But they're also a great tool that, if you're someone who struggles with Achilles issues, then actually you might choose to go for a higher stack shoe just to offload your Achilles a little bit whilst you're doing your running, let that settle, and then you might go back into your lower stack shoes from there.
That's quite interesting. I never appreciated that. That's really interesting that
I
a
don't
higher
know. I don't
stack
think I
shifts
did.
that load higher up the chain.
I
thought it
love
was
that.
all
That's like
to do with.
super simple thinking. Like there's the second brilliant takeaway to just stick in your mind, and you've learned something. And I guarantee you, Grant, you and I bring this up with at least half a dozen athletes over the next week as a gem of a. Basically, no one watched the podcast. We just want to look dead clever. We researched this ourselves. So yeah, no, that's amazing, Rose. That's fantastic. And then look, we said there was 4 things people aren't thinking about.
Can we
We've
stay on
decided.
there a little bit? Just
Sorry.
one more point. So you mentioned stack height. There's a couple
Mm.
of other things with the run shoe, right? You've got your heel to toe drop.
Yeah.
And you've got your either neutral shoe, or you've got your stability based shoe, or you've even got orthotics.
Yep.
Have you got any opinions on all of these
I
different
could talk about
things?
this forever. Orthotics. Orthotics are massively debated amongst physios. Some people are really pro it, other physios are against it. I guess where I stand with orthotics are basically trying to support your arch. And actually, if you can do the right S&C in the gym to get the intrinsic muscles within the foot working harder, you're going to be less reliant on needing that arch support in the first instance. And I think if you ever incorporate any level of support in your shoe, it should always feel really natural. So you get quite a lot of people who will go for the stability shoe and they'll say that they're really aware of that support on the inside of their arch. A shoe shouldn't be manipulating the way that your foot is trying to work. So it shouldn't be trying to push your foot in the opposite direction. It should be working with your foot and supporting your foot. So if you're really aware of any of that support in the shoe, it's definitely not the right shoe for you.
Just like on that, doing the correct work to make the feet strong enough to do. I went to E10 in Kenya and obviously like observed a very different world of running up there, inability level in general, but just obviously like there's an awful lot, a lot of these runners, they're not Kipchoge, out there with deals with Nike. They run about 7 minutes slower, so therefore up there they're no one. There's thousands of them that can do it, and therefore they're poor. They're running in hand-me-down shoes. I spoke to a young lad who was Maasai and was up in E10. He'd started running not that long ago actually, and was very good at it. Obviously, come from a high altitude background. I noticed on the outside of his room, he had 3 pairs of shoes. One was a size 7, one was a size 9, and one was a size 11. And they were his running shoes. They all had holes in the bottom. They were all, big brand shoes that had been left by previous guests at the running camp place we were staying. And he'd just run it. And we looked at it. I said to him, back where we're from, everyone is like got the latest gear and they're so aware of changing their shoes every so often. He said, yeah, we're aware of that as well, but I don't have the money to buy other shoes. So I just do strength exercises on my feet to make sure my feet can cope with whatever I'm running. And these guys, this guy was running 8:25 for 3K or 8:35 at altitude or something crazy like that in these shoes. We actually got home and the guy I was traveling with, his son is an ITU professional, actually sponsored by ASICS and was the same foot size, so actually sent him a set of new carbons over for his scholarship trials for the US. I just thought it was just the perfect example of how making the body strong in the correct way for running, which goes throughout this whole podcast, doesn't it? The correct thing you need to tolerate. And I'm not saying everyone should run in wrong size shoes and make their feet super strong, but it shows what's possible, with the right S&C and the right conditioning for the body. So
yeah, and the other thing reason I think that's really important is that if you look at running shoes, each time they bring out a new edition of that shoe, they'll tweak the shoe slightly. So Hoka's a really good example of this, that their neutral running shoe, their previous season was quite low stack. And then when they updated them, they put loads more foam in them. So they went to like a 40 mil stack, which is quite high for a lot of people. And if you had got on really well with the previous edition, it didn't mean that you were going to get on well with the next edition. But if you're quite adaptable as a runner and you do the right S&C, then you can basically wear any shoe that you want as long as it feels comfortable on your foot.
Do you think that's the best way to pick a shoe? Try them on?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Go for comfort all the time.
That's interesting.
Brilliant. So look, our bonus topic, the last thing that people might not be doing enough of, and I definitely think this is correct. doing your easy run on what we would call the trails. So let's be clear about what the trails are. That's probably, this is the way I see it. Anything near to where you live that is not running down the street on tarmac. So this could be a canal path, a forest path, round a football pitch, round a golf course. If you're lucky enough to live in the mountains, don't go too steep on your easy day, but just run over mixed terrain. And so, just explain a little bit to us why you think this is why is that little difference so important?
Again, I just think that that's functional strength and stability work that you're doing without having to take any extra time out or energy to do it. If you're running, even if you're running on a towpath, that's going to make the intrinsic muscles around your foot and your ankle work harder. As you said, when you're running uphill, that's having to get your glutes and your posterior chain activated. It's basically just a way to functionally strengthen the right muscles, but within an activity that you're already doing.
So bang for buck, you're saying time crunched person, go and run on that terrain, because again, it's going to make you a better runner.
100%. Yeah. And I just think that when you run on the flat, it feels easier. I even did that last year. I didn't do a lot of speed work in any of the training that I was doing, but I was regularly running through the trails. I then went and did a half marathon and ran a PB, but not because I'd done loads of good quality speed sessions. I just got strong running on the trails, and then I felt really resilient when I was doing a flat road run.
It's interesting. I once heard Ethiopian say that they run in the forest up and down this hillside and really uneven terrain, and they describe it as a massage because you're changing the muscles that you're using. Maybe won't feel like a massage to many people, but
okay. So look, I mean, what we've got to here is that all of these things will make you a better runner. Yet they're probably fairly low down the priority order for most athletes in terms of what they think will make them a better runner. We're just gonna we're gonna talk about what people are generally thinking about. We're just gonna give and again hoping to. So everyone's out there going, right, my key session this week is X on the track doing 400s, or I'm doing some tempo reps, or and I'm going to execute it like that. I think people are, especially people that are maybe underconfident in running as well, that they're really trying to get better. So there's a big intent to go and push themselves, and I think everybody's willing to go out and do these sessions and do the hard work. So we haven't got a problem here with people forgetting to do this, but maybe where the problem lies is possibly like how people are controlling intensity within these runs. And I don't know, Grant, do you want to talk a little bit about session execution with some key run sets?
Yeah, I guess, listen, sports, endurance sport, the thing that we mostly need to do is move those thresholds on, make you more efficient, make you better at that. I think, especially with running, kind of as you say, that the tendency is to push things just that little bit too hard, become quite, more anaerobic, or certainly have a tendency to use that anaerobic energy system a little bit more. We wrote some good sessions down, and maybe we can talk a little bit about the best way to execute these sessions. The first one was 3 by 10 minutes at a kind of tempo pace with a 3-minute flow. And the idea of this was to sit just under your LT2, or your threshold. And in essence, it should feel quite controlled. It shouldn't be a kind of maximum effort. And I think a lot of people kind of go down that rabbit hole of, right, I've got 3 by 10 minutes. That should be it, the best pace I can hold 3 by 10 minutes for, right?
Yeah. The way I always try to think of it, we're trying to raise threshold from underneath here. So you're really trying to not really pass LT2 in this session. It's a push session, and when you give someone 3 by 10 minutes tempo or half marathon effort, maybe a very easy way to describe it, I think they're liking it to what it feels like at the end of a half marathon. And actually, if you think about the start of any half marathon you've ran well, the first 10 minutes is for free. You're not dying. You're perfectly in control. The second 10 minutes is still not too much worse. And by the time you get to 30 minutes in, you're still, that's the kind of intensity level. And we used 3 by 10 minutes. You could do a bigger, you could do more work at this intensity, really. We just made a nice, simple session to talk about. But I think that's probably like one of the first things is just simply, I once had it said to me, but by a very good runner, actually. I was talking to them and talking about, I was talking about something about, oh, this was hard in training. And they just looked at me and went, training shouldn't be that hard. And it stuck with me for a long time, because in general, it really shouldn't. You're not meant to be going to the well 6 times a week. It's, you're just, you're just trying to change it. You're just trying to work on an area of physiology, work on the threshold. A session like that is to push from below. So stay below, stay in control. It doesn't mean it's easy. You do 6 by 10 minutes and you soon start finding that hard, but it's hard in a different way, which maybe just leads us on to, next session I think we wrote down was maybe a pull session, 8 by 3 minutes, where you probably are from an effort level and a pace level, probably are treading over the threshold. We might describe it as 10K pace, but people, it's 8 by 3 minutes with 60 to 90-second recovery. And it's the recoveries that allow the manipulation of the session, the control of the lactate, etc. So just describe a little bit, Grant, how you might think as an athlete going into a session like that.
Yeah, this one's definitely a trickier one to hit right. Really good example. I had a very similar session to this last night on the track. It was 2 times 10 times 400 meters, so the reps were shorter, but the intent was the same. It was sitting just above threshold for an extended period of time, so the reps are nice and short, so that you can go at a faster pace without kind of exploding. And by rep 4, I knew I'd went way too fast to start, and there's no way of coming back from that. You're just going to continually get harder and harder, and that session that was meant to be just over threshold, you're just pulling it up slightly, ended up becoming a VO2 max session, and I was hands on knees at the end of it.
Look, it's good to know that with all the experience you've got, you still get it wrong some days. Don't we all? I can think of sessions I've done lately that, it's just you're taking it out too hard for what you've got on the day even. And it's not a problem. I think it's how you learn. The session goes a bit wrong that day. You learn from your mistakes. You start to understand yourself. You execute better in the future.
Yeah. How would you execute that session, Rose?
I think the most important thing with that is that, you shouldn't be on rep 2 or 3 and already dying. Like, the whole point of it is it's repeatable, isn't it? Like, you should get to rep 8 and you should feel fatigued. But you shouldn't be on the floor on all fours, not able to do it. I've actually done a session similar to that before, when I've got to rep 4 and I've bailed because I've just gone out too hard and I'm like, I actually can't do 4 more at this pace. And I think that's the problem, is that quite often you chase the number. You have an idea in your head of what you think that pace should be or what you think you should be able to do. So you chase the pace rather than going off feel and letting your body tell you what you're capable of doing that day.
And it's a really good point. A brilliant way to circumvent that is get off the running track, get off the good GPS, just stick it on time. I'm 8 by 3 minutes. I know roughly how this should feel. And just go to feel, and then review the numbers after. Especially if you're, maybe lacking fitness, or maybe it's windy, or maybe, a multitude of different reasons as to why it might not be so simple just to hit a pace.
Yeah, I know, Rose, Jen's half marathon PB came from a period where her watch had broken for months, and she ran with a bike computer in her hand like a stopwatch. But obviously, it's got miles an hour on there. It's not telling her how fast she's running from a minute per mile pace or anything. She was literally using it as a way to just record the data to go to training peaks, and that was it. And she ran like a massive PB, 4 minutes, I think, off the back of it. 3 months of going, I don't really know what pace I'm running, but I know how long the reps are, and I know how this, and it's probably the most successful period of running I've known her have off the back of not having, not chasing the number. It didn't really matter. You even finished the session. I don't know what pace I just ran at, but it felt
Mm.
right. So it was
And I
right.
think it's just because you become intuitive, isn't it? And that's what I think that's a mistake that people make when they've been injured and they come back, is they chase the pace that they used to be able to run, but you have to accept that your fitness has dropped. So at that point, you are better off just working off like RPE or just being intuitive about the pace rather than looking at the specific numbers.
There was a study that had come out ages ago, and I could never find it, but it really struck me. And it was talking about the most accurate way to hit the right intensity levels. And number one came out as actually measuring it with lactate. Number two came out as feel. So how did the session feel? What was the
I think I
RPE?
saw this study. Yeah.
And then 3, 4, 5, 6 was heart rate, pace, power, etc., etc. So
But everyone's
funnily
doing it the other way around, aren't they? Power and pace first, then heart rate, then feel, and then no one's using lactate. So yeah, it
they'll
is
check it and then say, nah, it's broken. It's not working. It's too high.
Nah, it doesn't lie. It doesn't lie if you know how to take it. But yeah, look, guys, super interesting discussion, and I think there's like a lot in there for people. Stuff in there, it's one of the things I think I've started loving about doing this podcast is, we get to. I know I talk to Grant a lot about coaching in general, and it's just an enjoyable discussion. You're always learning. There's some stuff you've said there, Rose, that's like just been really, really useful for us guys. So I can imagine athletes, there's probably 10 times that amount of information in there. So really appreciate you coming on. We'll put some notes at the bottom of the show on run drills and anything else of use, maybe some of your wise words that you came out with today that people could take away. So appreciate that. Thanks, Rose.
No, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much. Definitely a good few quotes in there that we can chop up and share, right?
Guys, good stuff.